and welcome to another edition of In a Matter of Minutes. My name is John Jones, the Advisor Marketing Services Director here at USA Financial, and today, in a matter of minutes, we're covering the topic of cybersecurity with Phil Smith, the IT Director at USA Financial. Phil, thanks so much for joining me today. Appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks for having me, John.
And the topic of cybersecurity in the 10th month of the year makes a lot of sense because it's Cybersecurity Awareness Month. And one of the things in working in the financial services industry that is always a concern, given we deal with money, lots of people are always targeting us to try and steal that money. So talking about cybersecurity, we'll talk about managing passwords. We'll talk about dealing with software systems, making sure they're updated. And then we'll go through some general cybersecurity best practices, things to look out for. So Phil, let's start on managing passwords. We've used Keeper Security for a long time, have that as part of an offering in our USA Financial HQ technology election. Let's talk a little bit about what that provides and some general password best practices.
Sure, definitely. And I think the two kind of play well together. So the best practices for passwords are things like they need to be long and they need to be complex. And complex means an uppercase, a lowercase, a number, and a special character in there. So when we start looking at what is a long password, now we're in excess of 12 or 16 characters, and you put all those characters in there, and our brains can only capture so much data. We can only keep track of so many things. And then you pair the next best practice on there, which is don't use the same password twice. So then as you start scaling this out, and we have however many websites that we are now going to, and you have to have a unique one for each one, there's a limited capacity of what our brains are actually going to be able to recall on those sort of things. So that's where the password vault, like Keeper Security, comes into place, where instead of us having to remember all those things, we remember one complex password, and that gets us into our vault. And inside of the vault, we then have each one of these records in there, and we can generate just these massively complex passwords. Personally, I like to do things like if the site says it can have a 128 character password, it's a 128 character password. Now, I'm never going to remember that, but I don't have to. I remember how to get into my password vault. The vault then gives me the password to get into that site. And the longer the password, the harder it is for the bad guys to crack that password.
And the idea being of not using the same password in more than one space is if one site gets compromised, you then don't have to fear that they are going to be able to then use that same password to get into every single one of your systems. And you now have to take the painstaking hours or sometimes days of figuring out, okay, how many systems do I have, and replace all those passwords across them.
Exactly. And so there's been cases where that has happened, where a particular site gets compromised, and if you use that same password multiple places, and a lot of times what they can see is your username is your email address. So now they have your email address, and all they're going to do is they're going to try that password that they compromised from site A, and they're going to try all the other sites that are even more important. So things like maybe they compromised a social media site that you had, but there's not really a whole lot of information there. But if you use the same password and they have your email and it's your banking site, or it's your power company site, or anything like that, they start going through their places where maybe you have a credit card that's captured or saved into that site. They can then grab your credit card and purchase things on your on their behalf on your ticket.
Yes, and the second part of that is multi-factor authentication. So they get the password, they get the login, they found the platform that those match up to, but then by instituting a multi-factor second layer of security, which Keeper also can keep track of within their system, so that you're not having to use a text of your phone, this email, you can have that routed all through one system if the login platform allows it. But now you're adding that second layer of security. So even if they do get the username and password, now they have to be able to get that security second passphrase, if you will.
Correct. And that multi-factor code changes out, depends on the platform, every 30 to 60 seconds. So that code is only good for that amount of time on those rotating ones. So you've got your username and password to get into your Keeper vault, and you have the multi-factor piece in order to protect that. And that multi-factor for your Keeper account is going to be on a mobile device. So now the bad guys have to know your username, they have to know your password, and now they have to have control of your mobile device in order to get the multi-factor pieces out of it. So it really lowers the pieces, or lowers down what the bad guys can get. Recently, Microsoft had a study that came out that said by simply enabling multi-factor on their Office 365 account, it mitigates 99% of all credentialed attacks. So it's the easiest. You talk about a low-hanging fruit. That is your low-hanging fruit for security, is multi-factor.
It's the old adage that, the hackers are kind of lazy. They're just trying to, from the confines of their bedroom or, office that they've rented, get as many accesses as they possibly can. And usually if you can raise a wall, you make someone else more tangibly interesting for them to go and attack. So I think that covers a great overview of Keeper. And if you're watching this interested in joining, we do have a negotiated rate. So reach out to the tech team at extension 144 or it@usafinancial.com for inquiries, or update your technology election to start making use of that. The next topic, Phil, is talking about security vulnerabilities within software and computers. We're doing this virtually right now on computers and through Zoom, and Zoom has gone through a lot of learning over time. But let's talk about Apple iOS and then Windows with Microsoft and the operating systems, and not only the operating systems that are running on a machine, but perhaps the machine or your phone itself, and what vulnerabilities can exist there.
Sure. So I think the first thing we need to think about is all software on all these computers is written by humans, and we are inherently fallible, and we make mistakes. And so those mistakes, whether accidental or if it was just a laziness that they put something in, the bad guys tend to find those things. And those are the footholds that they use to get into your system in order to do the bad things. So no matter which device that you have or what software you're using, those things need software updates. So like you were even mentioning Zoom, John, Zoom, from time to time, you'll see it actually do updates. So you need to pull down those updates for that application, because that means there was a vulnerability that was found. Let's go ahead and get that update in there, plug that hole. Bad guy now has to find another way in. Same thing happens with Windows and Mac OS. So Windows has what they call Patch Tuesday, which is the second Tuesday of every month, and they release a whole bunch of patches. The sooner you get those on there, the better. Those are just filling those holes. Mac doesn't have quite that same level of piece, but they have an updating piece on there, and it will actually highlight in your toolbar at the top, and Finder will tell you when that you have updates that you need to put in place. Strike that, it's not Finder.
It's the system settings now, I think.
Yes, yeah.
And then even, when we're talking about the, phones that we carry around in our pockets, massive supercomputers that can do far more than the supercomputer of 10 years ago, just sitting around in our pockets. At some point, those stop being supported. So, we're on iOS 14, I think, just launched recently. And as those start to come out, the older versions of, iPhone 1, iPhone 2, 7, and all of that, and even Windows 10, if you have that on your computer. XP has been gone for a long time. Professional Windows 8, I think we were also talking, has been decommissioned in terms of its support.
Yep, so the only supported for the Windows platform right now is 8.1 in Windows 10, and 8.1 will be coming up, I believe, end of next year. I'd have to double check on that one. Sure. And then Mac OS, they have their versionings, and then when you start getting to the mobile devices, you have a whole nother level. So you've got Mac or the Apple iPhones. They've got levels that the hardware, they've locked it to where the hardware can only get to a certain level. So your iPhone 5 or your iPhone 6 will only be able to get to a certain level. And typically it's about 3 years. So if your device, when it first came out, not when you got it, but when it first came out, is older than 3 years, it's probably not supported anymore. Same thing happens with Google phones. So I've got an Android phone, it's actually from Google. And that is only supported for 3 years, and then they ended at that point.
All good things. So something to consider. Look and see what operating system you're running, how old your phone is. If you're still carrying around that very first iPhone, you may want to look at that, especially given the financial data that can be accessed through mobile devices and computers and desktops and laptops as well.
And what happens on those older devices is they stop updating. They don't allow you to go to the new version. So all of the vulnerabilities, all the accidents that were in that code will never get patched at that point. So there's no updates coming for you. And so the bad guys, when they see that, they're like, game on, let's get these pieces.
Yes, yes. So we talked about sort of infrastructure pieces. Let's talk about the human side of cybersecurity. So even having the most up-to-date software, having a virus protection on your computer, using great security, we are all human. As you mentioned, programmers are fallible. They're not perfect, and they're trying to outrun the bad guys. But there comes a point where a lot of the onus and the requirement to stop a lot of these cyber attacks comes on the individual user. Being on alert for things that might be out of the ordinary. You weren't expecting to receive an invoice that just showed up from a vendor that you've never dealt with, or even if you have dealt with that vendor, they're sending you an invoice, but you didn't have any services rendered. So let's talk a little bit about sort of that, the red flag that should always be waving, or as I like to say, always be skeptical when it comes to cybersecurity and being on high alert.
And that is the term that's used in the industry is called hardening the human. So we can harden systems, we can harden software. The hardest part is hardening this software. And so it is having a bit of a critical eye at things that come in. So I've got 2 teenage kids at home, and what we always tell our kids is just because it's on the internet doesn't mean it's true. Just because it shows up in your inbox doesn't mean that it's true. So anybody can send you a piece of email, and they can have a payload in there, and they can say, hey, you know what, this is a fax, you received a fax, you need to see this immediately, and it looks like they've got a fax cover page on there, and immediately they're like, man, I don't want to miss out on whatever this fax is. But you have to take a critical moment and say, I don't have e-faxing service. I shouldn't be getting an electronic fax. That's probably not right. Sure. Some of the other things that happen is, like, even if you've gone through the process and you've got complex passwords, you've got multi-factor on your email, it doesn't necessarily mean that your clients have done the same thing. So if their email account has been compromised, the bad guys can actually send an email from your client's email to you saying, hey, I need you to send all of our funds to this other account. Here's the electronic transfer number. Just go ahead and get it done. Now, if that's not a communication that you normally have with your client, and even in those transactions, you probably should pick up the phone and talk to them on that. It's some of those things coming in going, well, that's not how my client normally talks. That's not how my client normally does business. Yeah. Let me reach out to them, talk face to face or over the phone to make sure I know what they're actually doing on the other side. The bad guys can use that email to look like it's somebody else to try to divert to another location. So it's taking that critical eye on what's actually coming into your inbox. If ever you're in doubt, please go ahead and send it on in to it@usafinancial.com. We've got all types of tools that we can check to see if that piece of mail is junk or not, and kind of have an idea of what's going on. Yep. To see if that is, yeah, go ahead, that is actually came in for a client that's legit, or, oh man, please tell me you didn't click on that, or you didn't put in a passcode or anything of that nature. So, and we can take remediation steps if you have made the mistake of giving up information to one of those sites. We can make sure that we lock you down so that the bad guys can't get into your accounts at that point.
And you mentioned probably needing to pick up the phone. If a client is requesting funds, USA Financial Securities and Compliance team does require that you pick up the phone and verify that. So just wanted to make sure that was pointed out. And you mentioned putting in your credentials. There are Microsoft is rarely ever going to say, oh, you have 27 email. I don't think they ever do that. You have 27 emails that aren't able to be sent because this thing, a mabobber, got disconnected. So please log into this platform that looks like it's actually Microsoft, but hackers are just trying to get your credentials. And when you put those credentials in, nothing happens. So again, being on alert, always being skeptical, and realizing, checking the from email, making sure that it's actually Microsoft.com as opposed to, dogsonwalks.com. If there is a link that's coming from your bank account, your Comcast, whatever the service provider is, hover over that link and it will give you the URL. If it's a bit.ly shortened URL, that's one of the big tactics that gets used because bit.ly is a known URL shortener, probably scam. It's going to go to a Comcast, or it's going to go to a Chase, or it's going to go to a Fifth Third URL if it's actually indeed coming. So having that high alert, looking out and sort of checking off the boxes to see, okay, is it actually from the person who it's saying it is? Am I expecting this? If I'm not expecting it, pick up the phone, call the accountant, call the CPA, call the client, not with the number that's been put in the email signature, because scammers are smart enough to replace those phone numbers in the email signature, but call the number that's publicly available or that you actually have written down in your Rolodex or CRM, reaching out and asking if this was actually coming. Taking that couple of extra minutes that it takes to verify can save hundreds of thousands of dollars in scammed money and a lot of frustration on your part. Phil, thank you so much. Any parting shots as we close out this October Cybersecurity Awareness Matter of Minute session?
Put me on the spot here, John. I would say if you're ever in doubt and would like a second opinion on security of either an endpoint protection or how do you do your Windows updates or how do you do your Mac updates, please contact the IT department. We can help you out with those pieces. And then just have that skeptical eye of what's coming in. Like John was saying, check the links, check the email address it came from, do these things. Does it smell fishy? If it does, your spidey sense goes off and it's time to say, hold up, we need to see what's going on with this particular messaging.
Excellent. Well, thank you again, Phil. We will see you viewers next time, and make the minutes matter.